The letter showed up 3 weeks after the last bolt went in on my bridge, a real honest-to-God bridge built across the creek with steel wood and about every ounce of stubbornness I had left in me. It arrived in this glossy white envelope with a golden return address from the Crescent Pines HOA Compliance and Infrastructure Division. Gold letters like they thought that would make it less ridiculous. At that point, I'd barely wiped the grease off my hands, still in welding gloves, boots kicked off by the door. Inside a bill, $7,632 for shared bridge maintenance and structural upgrades. I just stared at it, lips curling up, then let out a laugh that echoed in the empty kitchen. Not out of joy, but one of those laughs you get when the world stops making sense. This cabin, after all, was supposed to be my sanctuary from the mess of suburbia, tucked right at the edge of the HOA's invisible fence. The old access road washed out years ago, so when nobody else lifted a finger, I built a bridge with my own 2 hands. No help from anyone. Certainly no HOA funds. Not $1, not one neighbor, not even a courtesy call. Just me and the county inspector who looked at my permit paperwork and shook his head like I was a lunatic. And now suddenly the HOA wanted me to pay them for fixing a bridge that would never exist if I hadn't built it. There's a word for that, but I'll let you fill in the blank. Early the next morning, I threw on a jacket and drove into town. The HOA office squats next to a fake genteel golf course, all beige stucco, pretending it's something fancier than it is. Inside, behind the counter, was Zelda Zimmerman president, pastel sweater, vest hair sprayed into submission smile that could cut glass. She had a folder with my name on it, and that look people get when they catch you with your hand in the wrong cookie jar. She didn't even let me talk first. "Mr. Jacobs, we've been expecting you." I slid the invoice onto the counter and asked real calm what kind of racket she was running. She stayed cool, told me my bridge was now shared emergency infrastructure because according to some buried clause, it touched the route they'd marked as an emergency path. Except that so-called route was just a faint trail on a map, never approved, never paved, never real. Zelda grinned like she had me cornered. "If you wish to contest the invoice, please submit Form 11A, $25 processing fee." It was also official, so smug it almost felt like a dare. "You people are something else," I muttered, turning to leave before I said what I really thought. Back at the cabin, I hauled out every scrap of documentation I had: permits, blueprints, progress photos. Then I dug through county records, property maps, even the HOA bylaws. And right there in black and white was the truth. The bridge sat squarely on my land, no easements, no public right-of-way, nothing. That emergency route existed only in rejected proposals gathering dust. All they wanted was my bridge and my money. Determined not to be their next victim, I headed to the county records office. The place smelled like stale coffee and old carpet. The woman at the counter had been at war with paperwork since before I was born, but she knew her stuff, handed me land surveys and easement records in no time. Everything I needed right there. My property, my bridge, my problem. That night, a strange tension hummed in the air. I set up a trail camera under the bridge just in case. Maybe I was being paranoid, but after finding fresh boot prints in the mud by my tool shed, I wasn't taking chances. The footage the next morning nearly made me spit out my coffee. A guy in a reflective vest sneaking across my bridge at 2 a.m, screwing a shiny metal sign into the rail, "Property of Crescent Pines, HOA, shared emergency access. Unauthorized use prohibited." They weren't just coming after my wallet, they were trying to rewrite reality. I printed out the footage, drove straight to the sheriff's office. Deputy Latham looked bored at first, but as soon as he saw the video, his whole attitude changed. "Looks like criminal mischief and trespass to me," he said, clipboard already in hand. He promised to take a drive out and have a look himself. Not one to leave things half done, I called Lenny, a buddy from my welding days who now did structural work for the county. He came out, gave the bridge a thorough inspection, and by Friday handed me a signed report stamped and notarized that proved down to the last bolt it was privately built and maintained no outside funding, no community involvement. Armed with paperwork and a fire in my gut, I dropped off copies at the Sheriff's Office County Board and then mailed the HOA a cease and desist letter plus a copy of their midnight sign escapade. A week went by with nothing but crickets, then a new letter from their legal department landed in my mailbox. Now they claimed I was obstructing emergency infrastructure, threatening to slap a lien on my home for endangering the community. The game had changed. It wasn't about a bridge anymore. It was about power and precedent. I called Mara, my cousin, the one in the DA's office across the county line. "This is fraud," she said without missing a beat, "and probably a few other things. Let me make some calls." Sure enough, a state investigator rang a few days later. Turns out I wasn't the only target. Someone else, a widow on the far side of Crescent Pines, had been pressured into paying for a wildlife fence that didn't exist. The investigator asked for my evidence, and I handed over everything. But Zelda wouldn't quit. I caught her personally, clipboard in hand, leading two guys in polo shirts up the trail by my bridge. She was pointing, gesturing, spinning some story, I'm sure. I wandered down, arms crossed, and made it clear this was private property. When she tried to get official, I told her straight up, this wasn't her land, those weren't inspectors, and I had her on video if she wanted to argue. The two guys looked about ready to bolt. Zelda just muttered something about me being difficult and stomped off heels, snapping against the gravel. That night I sent the latest batch of evidence to the state investigator, photos, audio, every last HOA email I'd collected. The next week, subpoenas started landing. The sheriff's department raided the HOA office, found years of fake invoices, phantom projects, and a fat stack of unaccounted money. They froze the HOA's accounts pending investigation. Zelda blamed clerical mistakes. Her lawyer disappeared. The entire neighborhood, it seemed, had stories billed for repairs that never happened. Projects no one saw, fees no one could explain. At the emergency town meeting, the place was packed. Neighbors jammed shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with anger and hope. The mayor called my name, and I stepped up, folder in hand, voice steady. Laid it out, my bridge, my land, their lies. Held up photos, signed affidavits, damning emails. People started shouting their own stories. Coyote fences, fake sidewalks, imaginary drainage work. The room nearly exploded. The mayor banged his gavel, voice cracking. "This is a criminal matter now." Zelda tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, but no one believed her anymore. Not after an old man in the front row pointed out he'd been threatened with foreclosure over a sidewalk that never existed. By midnight, state investigators had gathered every scrap of evidence from the meeting. The next morning, local news vans swarmed the neighborhood. The DA called, wanted me to testify before the grand jury. The hearing happened in a courthouse miles away to avoid intimidation. I wore my best flannel boots, shined, told my story. The indictments landed hard. Zelda and two board members charged with fraud, conspiracy, falsifying documents. Another board member flipped, handed over years of emails proving the scam went back a long way. The old HOA was dissolved. A temporary oversight committee was put in place, rules rewritten. No board could ever claim private land without a real easement. No fees without a public vote. No decisions without unanimous approval of those affected. The bridge stayed mine. I welded a small plaque to the post-private build. No HOA access. 2024. Life slowly returned to normal. New neighbors stopped by, a couple in their 30s who'd almost backed out of buying after hearing the rumors. "We're glad you stood up," they told me, crossing my bridge for the first time without a toll, without an invoice, just as neighbors should. The trial began as spring thawed the creek and the bridge's beams sang with the current below. I went to every hearing, wanted to see it through. Zelda sat across from me. A shadow of the queen bee, she'd been no more pastel, just a tired blazer. Her lawyer tried blaming paperwork, but the evidence was clear. Emails, maps, digital records, even a doctored parcel map that had been handed out at the last HOA meeting. That sealed it. The verdict: guilty on all main counts. Zelda got 2 years, the other's house arrest and restitution. The old office was turned into a lending library. I helped write the new bylaws, short, plain, and honest. 1 term per member, all spending public, no power over private property ever. That May, we had a neighborhood potluck, the first in years. People brought food, stories, laughter. The mayor dropped by, not as an official, just another neighbor. He said, "We learned the hard way, power's nothing without trust." No applause, just a bunch of folks nodding, letting it settle. A few days later, I got a letter from a new resident, a simple thank you and a charcoal sketch of the bridge, signed and dated, built right. It hangs by my door now. The cabin's quiet, the bridge holds fast. The sun catches the sign, I weld it every morning. Looking back, the lesson isn't about bridges or bylaws. It's about holding the line, not for pride, but for what's right, even when the world tries to gaslight you out of it. Sometimes justice isn't quick, and it sure isn't easy. But in the end, it lands where it belongs. So where do we draw the line between community and control, between helping and overreaching? Maybe you've wrestled with your own flavor of injustice, or maybe you've got a story about standing up when nobody else would. I want to hear it. What does justice look like to you? Where's your line in the sand? Share your story down below. Let's see where this conversation leads.